Hi, this is Jim Paff. If you like the content that you see here, please like and subscribe to our channel, and be sure to follow us at politicsisn'tnice.com. You can also go to locatejim.com. Thank you. For those of you who have listened to me filling in for Michael from time to time, or have seen my listened to my weekend program from 11 to 1 here on the station, you know that I spent a lot of years in Washington, D.C. I spent 8 years, in fact, working for 2 different congressmen as their chief of staff. I have a lot of friends in Washington, a lot of enemies too, by the way, but a lot of friends. And I have to say without hesitation, and I say with firm resolve, that Washington, D.C. is filled with a whole bunch of liars and far too many people who like to sleep sexually with someone other than their spouse. Now that seems really harsh, I know. But I don't know how to communicate to the average person how bad Washington, D.C. really is. I mean, everyone knows it. Don't get me wrong. I know you know it. And there's a great biblical lesson in the difference between knowing and understanding. And it all begins with Proverbs chapter 1. Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I don't think we really, truly, in this country, have enough fear of God. I'm convinced that our understanding of what life is about is centered far too much on ourselves and our own particular perceptions. I think Christians are just, self-proclaimed Christians are just as guilty of it as the culture at large. Those who would never profess to be a Christian, or those who are of any other religion, anyone out of the Judeo-Christian ethic. I mean, the fear of God is actually a good thing. If we understood the fear of God, and this is, by the way, this is about politics, okay? I just want you to understand. I'm saying this because of political points that I feel need to be made today when you consider everything that's going on. The fear of God causes a person to recognize that they are limited in scope in their connection to life in general. The fear of God causes people to understand that they are accountable to others and not themselves only. The fear of God causes a person to rethink how stupid they can be. And to recognize that they really can be very stupid. See, I bring up this issue of the fear of God for a couple things. And I bring up this issue of what Washington, D.C. is about for a couple reasons. The major reason is because we just had a hearing yesterday on the Afghanistan situation. In the midst of this hearing, we had General Mark Milley, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testify. And in the discussion, one of the topics that came up is his quotations in a new book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, where he related to Bob Woodward and Robert Costa his concerns about Donald Trump and his concerns about whether Donald Trump was going to use nuclear weapons. Now, that's not the story that Mark Milley communicated yesterday, precisely, because he's having to backtrack and cover his rear end. And this is why I want to emphasize for everyone who has not experienced Washington, D.C., I know you know it's bad, and you're smart people. You're a smart person. I totally, excuse me, am not trying to demean you particularly. My concern is that we all understand what Washington, D.C. is about. And Washington, D.C. is filled with liars and far too many people who have sex with someone other than their spouse. I think we need to fundamentally understand that this is true. And I'm not exaggerating. Again, I spent 8 years in Washington, D.C. I've seen the behaviors. I've seen the people. I'm far more concerned about the lying, obviously. And I think it's far more prevalent. And I think we all know that it's there. But I bring up the sex thing because we still to this day do not know how precisely how many millions of dollars have been paid out in sexual harassment claims, the details of which we know nothing about, because both the amount of money and the details of the sexual harassment claims that have been levied against members of Congress over decades are not fully disclosed even to this day. And these are sexual harassment claims that took place amongst their staff. So that's why I bring the sex thing up, because it is a problem. It's a real issue. But the reason it's an issue, and the reason it's obviously both lying and adultery are severe sins in God's eyes. He is a holy God, and we just don't even compare. We don't have none of us rises up to a level of even comparison with God. So we're all guilty. It's not these particular guilty people. The problem with these particular guilty people is that they are literally making decisions that affect your life every day, and they have almost all of them have no moral foundation from which they inform themselves on how to take those decisions. We used to do far better with this in the United States. It's never been perfect. The problem of lying and adultery have been around since almost the Garden of Eden. Not quite that far back, because as far as I know, Adam and Eve were faithful to one another, but it wasn't very far away from that. Human history is replete with people who gain positions of power and twist it for their own personal benefit. You know, the term public servant is useless. My friend Matt Kibbe runs an organization called Free the People, a fantastic liberty-minded organization that everyone should get connected to. Logan Albright, a person that works there and kind of a jack of all trades, he also wrote a book about the word public servant and trying to change our perception of that. These people are not public servants anymore. They are their own personal, they're their own personal fiefdom, and they are seeking to obtain slaves amongst the people of this country for their own self-aggrandizement, for their own purposes. By and large, that's what politicians are. This was on full display during the hearings in the Senate about the Afghanistan withdrawal. Not only do we have to go through the whole issue of the stupidity of the Biden approach to withdrawal, which I firmly supported for years, a withdrawal from Afghanistan. We were there far too long. But no one talks about being stupid. We were stupid the way we got into it to begin with. What's more stupid is how we got out of it with Joe Biden. It's crazy. And that stupidity was on display. But the real problem is you have a general who is in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is convinced in his own mind that he was absolutely correct to go around the President of the United States to coordinate with his peer in a foreign country, which is at best relatively hostile with us, certainly hostile with people in that region in Asia, China I'm speaking of, and then to go talk about it in a book. And in fact, to go and talk, it's bad enough that he did it. That he went and talked to reporters about it is even worse. I'm going to play some clips of that today. But before we go to a break, I want to make this as clear as I can to you. I know you know this, but please just, you need understanding too, to know how severe it is. Because if you really understood how bad it is in Washington, D.C., you know how bad it is. But if you understood it, if you had understanding about it, you would be screaming in the streets right now. We would be absolutely demonstrating at every state capitol in this country. We would expand our demonstrations against school boards. And what we would be doing is absolutely taking this country back at elections. At every election, everywhere up and down the ballot, every year. Because you have local and municipal elections in these odd years. This is serious. It's got to be addressed.